Hello, welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. We are very passionate about two things, technology and our world. In each pod, we will be interviewing some fascinating people, business leaders, but those with a special interest in solving the biggest issues facing humanity today. Think the environment, think healthcare provision during a pandemic, think global social injustice. If you want to know more about technology's immense potential to fix and transform, then you're in the right place. In this episode, I speak to Chris Chambers. Chris works for Ordnance Survey, the national mapping agency for Great Britain. Although it is known primarily for its paper maps, Ordnance Survey's highly accurate geospatial data underpins many public sector services and has played a vital role in Britain's response to COVID-19. In the interview, we discuss that and its £1 billion digital transformation. But first, Chris gives his own perspective on the work of Ordnance Survey.
Ordnance Survey is the national mapping agency of Great Britain, and it's our job basically to capture the geographic information of Great Britain. So we maintain something called the National Geographic Database, which contains around 500 million features, and it ranges from things like car parks and buildings and driveways, all the way up to information on things like an address of a property and where that property is, and the sort of business that occupies that property as well. So it's our job to capture and maintain that National Geographic Database, and then to make sure that the public sector and the private sector have access to that data as easily as possible and can use it in their applications when they're serving citizens and when they're serving members of the public and making policy decisions. So we're very much around making sure that we have the most current, complete database of geographic data possible for the use by other people.
Excellent. And we know, Chris, that there's a whole load of transformation going on at the moment around data and technology, and in the public sector as well, even if it may be a little bit slower to the private sector, but certainly in the public sector and government, they're embracing technology more than they ever have done. And I know Ordnance Survey are also kind of transforming and using APIs and different data products and that. Maybe can you talk a bit about your kind of own technology transformation?
Yeah, so most people know about Ordnance Survey as the map people. They're the people that create the Explorer and Land Ranger maps. But we're so much more than that. We are a data organisation and have been collecting data since 1791. So what we're trying to make sure is that people can get access to that data far more easily. And what we find is that a lot of organisations, as you say, in the public sector and a lot of utility companies have been using our data for many decades. But that takes a lot of specialist knowledge to get the value from the data. So you get data sent via DVD, you then load it into something called a geographic information system, which is a piece of software, and you then start to interrogate the data and to get the answers that you want. So the public sector and those energy and infrastructure customers, utility companies, have been using our data for many years and have come to know and love it. But what we're finding now is that the next generation of potential users, so people like prop tech organizations like financial institutions and insurance companies, they are wanting that data supplied to them in a far more accessible way and far more quickly. So that's why we're really transforming the way that Ordnance Survey data is supplied to those organizations. So we're moving away from data supplied via DVD, supplied every 6 weeks, and far more towards the data available on demand. So available on a daily updated on a daily basis, and available via APIs, so that people can have access to that instantaneously at their fingertips, rather than have to order data and get data delivered to them 3 or 4 days later via DVD. So it's really trying to reduce the barriers to usage for this new audience of users. And the reason I call them a new audience is basically we have this group of people, we call them developers or specialists in terms of online use of the data. And what we find is that most people in that community have never heard of Ordnance Survey about our data that we have, rather than just those maps I mentioned earlier. So what we're trying to do is, and we say that we're not on their menu. We're not on their menu when they're thinking about using geographic data or using location data. They go to other people. So what we're trying to make sure via this transformation in what we're doing is that people are aware of Ordnance Survey, aware that we have world-class data that's available to them, and that we reduce the number of barriers reduce as many barriers as possible to make it as easy. We're on their menu, and that they choose us for their applications.
Okay, that's really interesting, Chris. I imagine there must be quite a few challenges. I mean, in our field of work, we talk a lot about legacy challenges for technology companies, and obviously a legacy when you've been around for decades and decades, like Ordnance Survey have, and there must have been many processes that have been sort of in place for years and years. This feels like quite a seismic shift for the organization and in its long history. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge transformation for us, digital transformation for us, and our technology teams at OS are doing a fantastic job. So what we currently have is a number of individual data silos, which are set up to create. We have, I think, over 75 different products that we currently publish, and many of those products are created from individual data silos. And what we're currently doing is transforming those individual data silos into a single database of data. So it's far more interoperable. So the data is able to integrate with with the other data sets far more easily, and also so that individuals and customers can come into that database directly and choose just the data they want.
That's great, Chris, and I'm sure we'll talk more about kind of what Ordnance Survey thinks it will be able to deliver once this transformation is kind of complete, and you have that option available to you. But let's talk now about the last year, because obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure you, like many other organizations, have been faced with kind of unprecedented challenges, but also you've been able to support the public sector's response to COVID-19, haven't you? Maybe you can talk a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it has been a very difficult time for many of us, hasn't it? And I think the important thing for us to highlight is the fact that we do not see ourselves as the heroes on the front line fighting against COVID. That is the people in the public sector who are doing that work for the NHS. People like my wife doing work in making sure the people at the general hospital are able to breathe more effectively. So that they're the people who are really sort of the heroes of this. What we do, though, is we make sure that they have the most current, accurate data they could possibly have to make sure that they're as well equipped as possible to fight the COVID. So what we've been doing is working with organisations such as NHS England, Scotland and Wales. We've been working with central government bodies. We've been working with local authorities, with emergency services, to make sure that they have as much geographic data as they want in order to make sure that they can have the fight with COVID as effectively as possible. So some of those applications, we've been working with Public Health England and with the Welsh Assembly to use address data to identify, to support them in identifying where vulnerable people are and where shielding members of the public are. So it means that they can more effectively target those people to provide services to them as quickly and effectively as possible. So there's other examples. We've also been working on where the COVID testing sites should be, so supporting government in working out where those sites should be. We've been working on things like mapping for emergencies. We've got a 24-hour service 365 days a year, whereby people in the public sector can get in touch with us and ask us for help immediately, and they'll get a response in 3 hours, whereby people can, if they need our knowledge or expertise or additional data, we'll respond to them really quickly for things like lockdowns, things like working out quick areas where they need to send out local testing to or mobile testing to. And we've done a lot of work with that with local authorities and the GP surgeries, etc. We've also been doing things like identifying where nearest GP locations are, where supermarkets with car parks are, locating where hotels are for hospital staff, where are the nearest hotels to a hospital to try and put up staff in temporary accommodation. So working with NHS England on that as well. And then beyond that, we've also been working on things like we have a range of about 440 partners who we worked with, who are experts in our data as well. And we've been working with them on some of the applications. So we've worked with a large organisation called Esri, for example, who have been using our data to identify where are the pavements and what is the capacity of a pavement, what is the likely footfall on that pavement, and therefore where are the areas that local authorities should try and target resources at to try and make sure that the pavements are widened or narrowed, and to try and close off streets or not. And they did a similar thing with beaches, actually, to see where last summer when it was hot rather than snowy outside, where are the beaches which are near to large urban areas and are relatively small, so there's a likelihood of high densities of people. So doing a lot of work with both government and also our partner community.
Hello, I'm Daniel Brigham, editor of Tech for Good magazine. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and if you want more, you can head over to techforgood.net for some compelling and thought-provoking stories. From high-tech insect farms that could solve world hunger to a global mission to counter the spread of COVID-19 disinformation, we've got Tech for Good covered. You can read and subscribe at techforgood.net.
But what kind of has the last year been like, Chris? I know you've obviously got a very close relationship with the public sector and government, and obviously I guess many of the kind of foundations are already in place before the pandemic. But you must have had to kind of rethink and really focus in on certain aspects of it when this crazy thing happened, because no one was obviously truly prepared for it. And what kind of lessons, I guess, have you learned over the last year about how you can implement these kind of initiatives as quickly and as effectively as possible?
So I think the three things we've identified in the last year since it happened, and this is very quickly at the start, we identified that people want more data. So the more data they can get their hands on, the better the decisions they can make. So a large amount of our time initially was just making sure that people that needed data to make decisions and to very quickly respond to COVID had that data available to them in formats that were accessible. They were aware that that data was available to them. Some people weren't aware of the value that the location data could provide to them. So the big thing initially was being very quick to respond to make sure that people knew about what data was available to them, knew how it would help them, and also was provided to them in a way that's accessible. The second bit was very much linked to that, is around skills and knowledge. So we were working with people to make sure they understood, not just what data was available, but how they could use it. So giving them examples of how it could be used, giving them training and online courses in how it could be used to make sure that people got the most value from the data that's available to them. And the third bit, I think, was all around making sure that we got the data to them as quickly as possible. So actually, some people only wanted really massive maps for a control center, massive paper maps that they didn't have capabilities to print. So very quickly we got we have those capabilities, and they got in touch with us via that mapping for emergencies, and we're able to very quickly print off these huge maps, or going all the way down to asking us very specific questions. So, for example, one of the examples we're trying to find out is where should we be putting these mobile testing sites, and we were very quickly able to carry out some very complex analysis on the data that we have to identify places that were near to major transport hubs, places that were, large car parks near to public areas, places that had electricity supplies, etc. So when you do all that, those are very complex queries that many people didn't have the expertise to do, but we absolutely do within OS. So we were able to carry out those queries very quickly and give them answers and say to them, well, actually, if you were trying to find the locations for the best COVID sites based upon the criteria you've given us, this is where we would recommend you put them.
Do you think, Chris, that in a way your kind of activities over the last year have paved the way for kind of the future of public services underpinned by data? Because there's always a national debate, isn't there, here in the UK around public service, and are we doing enough? Could we do more? How can we do more? Do you feel like data is going to really be kind of the backbone of public service in the future?
Completely. Yeah, I think listen, we'll never take away from, as I say, those frontline services that need people. We can't take away from that. I think all we try and do is make sure that the data is there to support better service provision. So making sure that the people who are deciding on where that service is provided can make better decisions or more efficient decisions. And I think data is really having its moments, and it has been for a number of years. I think COVID has really pushed that, and we see that by a lot of the feedback we get from a lot of the customers who we've had for a number of years are starting to see that they can use data in different ways to make better decisions. So they're starting to really see the value of, for us, it's location data, but it's not just about the location data. It's about linking lots of different data sets. And that's where we're really seeing the value, is that people are starting to see, well, actually, if you've got 5, 6 different data sets, how do you link them all together to make better decisions on, we have this phrase, everything happens somewhere. So, the location we see is being used by people like NHS England, same in Wales and Scotland, and they're starting to really link lots of different data sets about an address, for example, and you're able to have that single understanding of an address and link all those data sets to it. So that means you can make that better decisions. And the other bit we're finding is that people want to spend a lot more time interrogating data and analyzing data to make the better decisions rather than managing the data. So what we're trying to do is remove as many barriers as possible for providing data, so they don't need to manage it. They shouldn't be experts in database management, for example, to use Ordnance Survey data. What we're trying to do is make sure that we provide that data via APIs, in formats that are easily accessible and managed, so that people can spend less time managing the data and more time interrogating the data to be able to make better decisions. So that's what we're trying to make sure, is that people can start to innovate more and capture efficiencies as well, but certainly innovate to make sure they can use the data that already exists in new ways. And I think the other bit we're working on, we've recently signed an agreement with Geospatial Commission, who are part of Cabinet Office, called the Public Sector Geospatial Agreement, and that's providing more access to more data sets as well.
Yeah, the potential of kind of multiple data sets and big data is really kind of, I guess, almost kind of infinite in this area, isn't it, Chris? But obviously, when you talk about data, people still often have kind of a negative perception and are maybe nervous about this amount of data being used and where it's coming from and who owns it and who's managing it and are they being responsible. Maybe you can talk a bit about how Ordnance Survey responsibly gathers and manages its data, because there is kind of, there is still that kind of national discourse, isn't there, around data and data privacy.
Yeah, of course, and we're very mindful of the elements of the big brother sort of culture, I suppose, that people are concerned about, and I think we take it really, really seriously. We have so many incredible policies that we've created around making sure that we don't publish data in inappropriate ways. I think the first thing to say though is that we do not capture any personal data when our surveyors are out, when our drones are flying over, when we have people capturing data in different ways. We don't capture information about individuals. We don't capture names. We don't capture any sort of information about those individuals, and therefore we don't publish any personal data either. So because we don't capture it, we don't maintain it, we don't store it, and therefore we don't publish it. And I think people should also remember that the vast majority of the data that we capture is actually publicly accessible. If you walk down a street, if you look at someone's house, that's very similar to the data that we capture. So we capture a building footprint that you can see if you flew over the top of a building. We capture where the fence lines are. We don't capture who lives in that house. We don't capture how many bedrooms there are in there. We don't capture who lives in that property. It's very much the data we capture is very much about the physical information on Great Britain.
Yeah, okay. But do you accept that as you kind of embrace more data sets and you have this API-led approach where everything is becoming almost a nervous system, that you're going to have to be extra kind of vigilant around this stuff? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have databases internally of who our customers are and what data sets they take from us. And we take that very seriously and make sure that we adhere to all the best policies. But I think when people are starting to link more data sets, what we're very, very conscious of is the fact that we don't publish data sets that when you merge multiple data sets enable you to identify an individual. So what we do is work with a lot of our NHS colleagues and people like the Office of National Statistics and Valuation Office to make sure that any information we provide does not mean that individual personal freedoms can be broken. So whilst again our data does not contain any personal data or information that is highly sensitive, we make sure that we work with others to ensure that they don't mistakenly publish any data at a very low area. So, for example, we've worked with the NHS in the past about not publishing data at a postcode level on health information, because actually sometimes postcodes go up to 100 properties, Other times there's a very low number of properties in a postcode, so it might be possible to identify individuals with certain health conditions. So we've worked very closely with those people in the past to make sure that they don't make any information available that should impact on any personal freedoms.
Do you want to keep up to date with the latest in enterprise, technology, and digital transformation? Visit digitalbulletin.com for news, long reads, thought leadership, and so much more. That's digitalbulletin.com.
Chris, your kind of passion for this topic and the power of kind of data in public services is really obvious. Where do you think that comes from, and how kind of proud are you of your work and the work of Ordnance Survey? Because as you said, it seems like you're really keen to get this message across that Ordnance Survey isn't just a stamp on the front of a map. It's an organisation that is really doing quite a lot of very important stuff around data and public service.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've got a big smile on my face now because it's one of those. I love sitting on the train and wearing my Ordnance Survey badge, and I love when someone says to me, "Oh, I love your paper maps," and I love it because I turn around and say, "Do you know what? We're so much more than that." And I tell them what we do and who uses our data. And I always see that sort of a little glint in their eye when they just understand that OS is so much more than paper maps. You know, we carried out some research a few years back that said, on average, a member of the public uses Ordnance Survey data 42 times a day without knowing it, and that's primarily because the people that your listeners rely on us. So we're a bit like that. That old terminology, intel inside. It's often OS inside. So you find from things like you get up in the morning and the electricity you use is provided to you by a supplier who uses Ordnance Survey data to identify where you are. It goes to the local authorities who capture, who come and collect your bins, and they use Ordnance Survey data to find out where the bins are and what days they should capture it. It goes to, God forbid you ever need an ambulance, but every single emergency service in Britain uses Ordnance Survey data to get to you as quickly as possible. Even when nowadays with COVID and the lockdown, all of the delivery parcels and all the delivery companies use Ordnance Survey data to get to you as quickly as possible and to make sure that delivery is as accurate as possible. So I'm absolutely passionate about it, and it's the thing that's kept me at Ordnance Survey for 15 years. And if you came into the OS building when we're allowed back, you'd see how passionate the 1,000 people are who are all there to make sure that basically, we make sure that our work supports others in doing what they need to do when they need to do it. So we're really happy to work in the background. We're really happy to support those organisations to be the best they possibly can be, because in the end we're doing it for the members of the public, for the citizens, and to make sure that the government policies are as effective as possible, the services provided by local authorities and emergency services are effective as possible, and also so that commercial companies can provide really good services as well. So yeah, I mean, you come to Ordnance Survey and you have a huge number of people who are very knowledgeable, also very passionate about what we do. And for me, the thing that keeps me going every day is to make sure that we get an ambulance to someone who needs it as quickly as possible. That's my motivation every single day, and to try and help them get seconds off their response times it means I can do it a better happy man.
Yeah. Brilliant, Chris. 15 years obviously is really testament to how much you enjoy the job. I don't really think we need to say any more than that. What about the future though, Chris? Obviously you've got this March 2022 point, which sounds like a really kind of major milestone for the organization as you bring kind of your data ecosystem together. I think the transformation program accounts to something like £1 billion, doesn't it? So it's a massive deal. With that in mind, how excited are you for the future and maybe another 15 years or however many years you want to carry on doing this?
Yes, it's a great time to be at Ordnance Survey. It really is. As you say, we've just agreed a £1 billion investment from government in the future technology and data that we provide. It has already started, as I mentioned, back in July. We started to deliver these new API services and new data under open terms as well. So I think that's probably one thing we haven't discussed yet, of course, is that we do also provide data under completely open terms. So there's new ways of accessing the data, both technology and licensing wise. And yeah, the future, the March 2022 deliverables is a really, really transformational moment for us in that it enables our customers to start to pick and mix that data they really want. I think it doesn't stop there, though. So in March 2023, we'll have delivered all these 60-plus new data sets as well, which means that people will be able to start to do new things with the data available from Ordnance Survey. And after that, there's still a roadmap of many, many interesting things we'll be doing. So looking at trying to get source data from beyond Great Britain, so looking Northern Ireland or beyond, to working with people like Land and Property Services, and also looking at, it doesn't stop. Customers' requirements don't stop there. So making sure that we have a really active, proactive roadmap with the Geospatial Commission at Cabinet Office, trying to make sure that what we deliver in 4 years' time is what people want in 4 years' time. So you're making sure that we're really on the front foot with our customers to understand what their changing requirements are, making sure that the transformations that we do now supports those future use cases as well. So things like drone delivery, we're working with organisations on how to make sure we identify where is the best place that a drone would deliver a parcel to. And we're also working with a large number of organisations on autonomous vehicles. Because of course, again, autonomous vehicles need to know where they are, they need to know where they're going, and they need to know how to best get from A to B. So whilst the use case is very similar to logistics nowadays, the technology and the data that are required for that is hugely different. And we're moving, I think, from a place where data was able to be used by humans to interpret. That's what maps were. They were basically data sets that were understandable by humans. And when you take humans out of the equation, the data has to be perfect. It has to be as good as it possibly can be. Because if you don't have high quality data, machines don't interpret things differently. They are machines that want to know an answer. So therefore, the data you give them has to be as accurate as possible. So that's what some of the use cases I'm really looking forward to over the next few years, is making sure that our data is as good as those use cases need.
That was the Tech for Good podcast. Listen, subscribe, and rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher.